Well, this is the video that I've been waiting for. Moon Knight trailer breakdown, Easter eggs, and details you missed from new rock stars because I want to understand as much as I can about Moon Knight in as quick a time as I can. Welcome, folks. I'm Jaby, joined by Achara Kirk.
What's up?
So if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button, bell icon, all notifications, and pretty please vote this up so that YouTube know you're enjoying what you're watching. Thank you, new rock stars, for allowing us to react to this. Very, very much appreciate it. If you guys haven't subscribed to them already, there's a link in the description below. You can click on that, give the original an upvote, and subscribe to them from there. All right, let's jump into this. Here we go.
Welcome back to New Rockstars. I'm Eric Voss, and this is a breakdown of the trailer for Marvel's Moon Knight, coming to Disney Plus March 30th, with Oscar Isaac playing Stephen Grant, aka Mark Spector, aka Jake Lockley, aka Vigilante empowered with the magic of an Egyptian moon deity, aka Egyptian mutant in Sabanur. Oh wait, no, Oscar Isaac was Apocalypse in another Marvel universe, and the X-Men won't get sucked into the MCU until Multiverse of Madness, when Oscar Isaac being Moon Knight in this reality will be like the 12th most confusing thing about that. But this trailer was filled with mystery and tricky visual glitches in this character's broken perception, so I am gonna go through this frame by frame to break down all the really cool stuff that you might have missed. And thanks to Boxu for sponsoring this video. More on them later. Let's get started.
Hello, and welcome to Staying Awake.
I have a sleeping disorder. I can't tell the difference between my waking life and dreams.
So the trailer opens with Oscar Isaac as one of his identities lying in bed using an app that helps one stay awake because he doesn't want one of his other identities to take over. He twists a Rubik's Cube at first with just one hand, as if this is a kind of coordination one identity might have that another might lack. Later we see the side that he is closest to completing is the white side, white being the color of Moon Knight's wardrobe, which in the 2006 Moon Knight comics from Charlie Huston explained, "I don't wear white to hide myself, I wear it so they see me coming. So they'll know who it is, because when they see the white, it doesn't matter how good of a target I am. Their hands shake so bad they couldn't hit the moon." I just love that quote so much.
Hold on.
Is that Charlie Huston,
That's what I was about to point out.
Favorite author?
Yeah, hold on.
I was wondering.
I gotta look this up. Yes. Oh my gosh.
Oh my god.
Now I have to read this for sure. I had no idea that Charlie Huston penned this. Charlie Huston, for those of you that don't know, is a novelist. He writes these very, very interesting stylized novels that are more short form. The first series that I was introduced to him through was a vampire series called Already Dead. The way that he does the dialogue is like dashes. He doesn't say who's talking. You're supposed to infer who's talking based on the nature of the dialogue because everyone has a very unique way of talking. He's able to assign people their own cadence and everything like that, their own just verbiage. And it's so interesting because you just power through the book really, really fast. And you generally speaking don't get lost on who's talking. And then he did another series called the Henry Thompson Trilogy. I just recommend you guys read it. Achara couldn't get into the Henry Thompson Trilogy, but she was enjoying Already Dead.
Yes.
I'm definitely gonna pick this up now, knowing that it was Charlie Huston who penned it, because I've read more of his books than probably anybody else. God, that's gotta be really exciting for him.
I just love that quote so much. It's part of the reason the character is so great. I had to share it with you. Also, the toggling colors of a Rubik's Cube, of course, reflect the toggling of this man's identities. He suffers from a form of dissociative identity disorder. The voice we hear right now is that of his Stephen Grant identity, with Oscar Isaac speaking in a British accent. But on the word dreams, the accent seems to switch to a different consonant pronunciation.
Between my waking life and dreams.
As if another identity is taking over mid-sentence. In the comics, Moon Knight's primary identity is Mark Spector, the son of a rabbi turned mercenary who ends up possessed by the Egyptian moon deity of Khonshu, becoming the vigilante known as Moon Knight, with powers linked with the lunar cycle. And he takes on other alter egos like wealthy 1%er Stephen Grant and taxi driver Lake Lockley.
What did you think about the accent thing?
That very first part, I wasn't super hot on his accent, but I couldn't hear how it changed because he's trying to do this Londony, Cockney-ish accent. Did he say that was supposed to be his Stephen Grant alter ego? Because that doesn't make sense to me unless he's like a kind of working class 1%er, which, you know, nowadays I guess there are more, but usually you associate the ultra posh accent. I couldn't really hear what difference he was talking about. I wish he had said, oh, and then he changed into, that's a Scottish accent. I was like, is he talking about a Scottish accent? Because I'm just not sure. That's an interesting little detail they pulled. I'm not sure if I entirely agree.
But obviously they're switching some things around here, because here he bolts several locks on his door. He puts tape on the cracks so that he'll know if the seal is broken, chaining his ankle to a lock that only one of his identities would know the combination to. The fact that he expects this other identity to not know how to just peel tape off of a door and put it back on tells us that the form he is worried about turning into into is a more monstrous one. So we're looking at a real werewolf Jekyll and Hyde scenario here. Steven turns in his bed, reflected in mirror glass that refracts him into three forms in total, perhaps a way of showing his two other identities, and yet he still twists around in fear as if he's looking at a fourth identity, maybe that of Moon Knight, as it creeps in on him. Let's move on.
Hello, and welcome to Staying Awake.
Yeah.
Okay, here that app service voice echoes over itself as if this is something he has used for countless nights, and then he bolts awake like from a nightmare, but notice how he is now wearing different clothes than before. So who knows if this is a different Knight, or if another identity took over overnight and just changed his clothes and calmly locked himself back up.
Right.
And as he stumbles out of bed, he steps in a ring of sand,
Yeah,
which he
what's
likely
that?
spread out to track any entity going out or going in, kind of like when that couple in Paranormal Activity used flour to track that demon. You'll notice among his stack of books is Adventures of the Soul, Journeys Through the Physical and Spiritual Dimensions. This is a real life 2014 book by medium James Van Praagh about the human soul, how it fits into this life, how it travels into the spirit realm. So clearly Steven is doing some research on metaphysics to try to understand his condition and how his soul is becoming detached from his physical body.
So you were asking about the sand yesterday.
Yeah, I was, because I was just like, why would he do that? Is it to track him going out?
Well,
the
he just
deal?
explained it. It's
Yeah.
almost like akin to, snow footprints or footprints anywhere in
Yeah.
mud or whatever it is in order to see, evidence of something having happened.
He's a somnambulist. That's what he is. He's just walking.
Now, the music throughout this trailer is Kid Cudi's Day and Night, a song that Kid Cudi said that he wrote to deal with the sleeplessness after his uncle passed away, an uncle that he
Oh, I
ended
didn't
things
know
on bad
that.
terms with. And the song Day and Night, Nightmare, is his version of the Ghetto Boys' Mind Playing Tricks on Me. The music video shows him slipping in and out of reality the way Steven/Mark/Jake never fully know what's real in their world. On to the next clip.
Huh.
Nice.
I think I'm losing it.
I don't remember that shot of him falling asleep
You
on the
don't?
guy.
You're bloody useless, Stevie.
Steven.
Okay, so Steven runs to catch this London bus. I'm assuming this connects to the shot we saw in the November teaser where his hands hit that bus, except now his hands are covered in these fancy white gloves. He could be finding himself in a new identity as he briefly passed out for a second. Could be the dressier version of that white suit that we've seen in the comics. He works at this museum. Up top, it reads National Art Gallery, an art gallery with a historical exhibit for ancient Egypt, it looks like. Now, I thought this was a real museum in London, but the National Gallery of London has a different architecture. I actually thought this was the British Museum, but
That's
if
what
you
I
look at the
thought.
architecture of the British Museum,
Yeah,
that is a
he's
completely
right.
different building than this. I did some digging. This is actually Budapest's Museum of Fine Arts.
Oh,
They
what?
use CGI to swap out that
Oh.
Hungarian for English. We should also be clear, this is not the same museum as the Museum of Natural History where Cersei and Dane Whitman work in Eternals, but both of these museums are in the city of London in the MCU, and I think that Eternals post-credit scene of Dane finding the ebony blade of his family, taking one step closer to becoming the Black Knight, and meeting Blade Mahershala Ali could set up those two to join Moon Knight in the future as part of an MCU Midnight Suns lineup.
That would be
Now,
super
whereas
cool.
comic Stephen Grant is a millionaire, this Stephen works at the museum gift shop under this flirty boss, Donna. I like how he corrects her calling him Stevie by putting on his name tag, just another example of him having to constantly reassure himself of his identity. And in this gift shop, of course, are surrounded by Egyptian iconography, a figurine of a scarab,
Yeah.
a bust statue, and these
Yes.
puzzles. One for the Cornet Marai, that's a necropolis in Luxor, and then another for the Book of the Dead. Oh, yes, 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 yes. The Egyptian Book of the Dead was a funeral text written by priests over 1,000 years. It contained magic spells in order to assist a dead person's journey through the underworld. Now, that's real world history, but elsewhere in the MCU, we got another Book of the Dead called The Darkhold, which is becoming hugely important. Scene with Agatha Harkness and WandaVision taken by Wanda to seek the multiverse for her children, and now showing up in the trailer for Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness, used by Doctor Strange, probably against the Scarlet Witch's wishes. Now, in the comics, the Darkhold was drafted by a demon named Chthon, who, in comics canon, initially gave Wanda Maximoff her sorcery, but in the MCU, these two Books of the Dead could come from the same textual history. We'll see. Moving on.
I can't tell the difference between life and dreams.
Thank you.
Lost the contact lens.
Hope you find it.
Thanks.
So here in his flat, Steven hears voices and then looks over in his bathroom mirror, and his reflection flashes very briefly into his fully suited up Moon Knight form, complete with glowing eyes, and behind him you'll notice the pale glow of the moon through that fog. I just like how when this spectral form appears, the moon shows up with him. This awesome
that's
flickering
nice.
light horror imagery also shows up in the far end of this hallway leading to the elevator, where we see our first clear shot of Khonshu, and he looks terrifying.
He does.
Huge bird skull floating off the shoulders with cobwebs dangling down, a ratty cape, mummified arms, and
Yeah.
he holds a staff with a crescent moon on the top. We actually caught what I think was our first glimpse of Khonshu back in the first teaser, that monstrous shadow lurking behind Steven on the museum floor as he stifled his screams. But here, Khonshu limps down the corridor toward him, his linen wraps dragging behind him, and he grabs that elevator door with that mummified hand before turning into a sweet old woman.
That's a
Don't
massive
trust
hand,
her,
too.
Steven. Next clip.
Oh, that's trippy.
Yeah.
Oh my god, you're alive. What's wrong with you, Mark?
Why did you call me Mark?
Okay, once again, we see that great shot from the teaser showing Steven reacting to his reflections in the display case
Oh,
glass.
shit,
and
I never
stepping
caught
forward,
that.
But his
Two of them
reflections do
too?
not follow. Even those two reflections between the two of them seem to have slightly different reaction speeds from each other. I think all three of these embody Steven's split identities. Now, the statue in that display case depicts the sun god of Ra on the far left. He has a falcon head.
Okay.
And then on the far right, Anubis, who has a jackal head, both of them appearing to mummify Osiris, the deity most associated with the process of mummification. Really, the weirdest things, though, about the shot are in the foreground. First, that crocodile, perhaps a Nile crocodile that you often see in these exhibits, could also connect to that crocodile
That's
on
what I was
the
about to
unknown
say.
collar screen on the flip phone. Both could be nods to Amut, the crocodile-headed goddess of the underworld. But also, beneath that croc, there appears to be mummified human remains on the freaking floor. And notice how Steven holds his arm as if he has been wounded or bitten. Maybe this guy was doing a bit of grave robbering, tampering with these remains, taking something off of them, and Khonshu's spirit jumped out and bit him. But notice as he steps forward, the shadow that stood behind him before he steps out of frame, after he passes that shadow, it is no longer there. Creepy. Now, Kid Cudi's lyrics of "hold the phone" repeat, as if the record is skipping, until Steven finally uncovers this crawl space containing this key and this flip phone, probably a phone that he heard ringing in the walls and thought he was paranoid, but it actually is a real phone and a key belonging to his other identity, Mark Spector. So the character we've been staying with this whole trailer is not really the main character of the story. We haven't really met Mark yet, which is why I love this trailer so much. I actually hope the next trailer spends most of the time with Mark, who is a badass mercenary
Right.
who somehow ended up as this pencil-pushing loser in London. How long has he really been this way? Was there some previous backstory that has been erased from his memory where he initially made first contact with Khonshu back in Egypt? And the reason he is working at this museum is to try to reconnect with that spirit. Now, the caller on this phone is the voice of actress Meg Hallamali, whom you may know as Rami's sister Dina on Rami on Hulu. And the closed caption identify her character name as Layla. Now, the most famous Layla from Marvel Comics is Layla Miller, aka the mutant butterfly, who has the power of resurrecting the dead at the cost of their soul. She actually makes her debut in the House of M event that we speculate Multiverse of Madness to be partly adapting. And Layla Miller is actually crucial to bringing down the House of M because she uses her power to restore the memories of superheroes, and she helps restore the reality. Doctor Strange even suggests that Wanda Maximoff might have created Layla as a failsafe to help the heroes in case something went wrong. Sure, this could just be like any Layla, but Meg Hallamali is such a great actress. It'd just be really cool to see her play a similar role in an MCU House of M event. So let's move on.
I must be very...
Do you think Layla will be limited to, I mean, this is all conjecture, obviously. Do you think Layla would be limited to this story or would go beyond the scope of this potentially towards Spider-Man? That's the first thing I thought of was because Layla restores memories. That was mentioned just now, right?
Yes, you are correct. It's entirely possible. I mean, I think with the MCU, we can't really take anything for being just happening in this one show. Anything could happen. I think it would be so cool if she crossed over and did other things.
I mean, everything's interconnected, so to speak. Unless they're just so dead set on Spider-Man having his solo journey and it not being at all tied to anything that's come before.
Difficult. Voice in your head. There's chaos in you.
Okay, here we meet Ethan Hawke's character, a cult leader that Hawke said he based on David Koresh, leader of the Branch Davidians in Waco, Texas.
That moment when Oscar Isaac drops the gun, realizing it's in his hand.
Yeah.
It so reminded me of Memento when Guy Pearce has a bottle in his hand after waiting to get into a scuffle with somebody. He's like, I don't know, I don't feel drunk. Why do I have a bottle in my hand? He had it ready to get into a fight. That's all. I just connected it to Memento like that because he's got this gun in his hand for defense and he's like, wait, what the hell is this doing in here? You know?
Right, yeah, because one of his personalities is that mercenary personality, Mark Spector. I assume that he had been using the gun or something and had been a total badass, and then suddenly he slips back into this other guy and he's just like, guns? I don't like guns.
Exactly.
The closed captioning identifies him as Arthur Harrow, who's a pretty deep cut from the Moon Knight comics, who only shows up in one issue, a storyline in 1985, where
God.
Dr. Arthur Harrow was a mad scientist with a facial disfigurement who works on a way to numb the pain centers of the human body, conducting some human experiments, basing his work on Nazi experiments.
Whoa.
Now, Ethan Hawke's version of the character seems quite different, but maybe his motive is the same. He could be a spiritual leader promising people who suffer pain to numb their pain centers. And I'm guessing all these people kneeling to him in Germany, Loki style, that this guy's got the goods. He has some kind of power. Now, this town square does have German signs and a cupcake delivery truck that a major
cute.
sequence later takes place upon. Those colorful buildings could actually be seen in the background of the November teaser shot where Mark comes to after beating up a bunch of guards. And now, surrounding Harrow are some armed guards that might be part of his cult, that suggest his cult is a militarized one. These guys wear matching jean vests and layers underneath those vests that match the color that Harrow wears.
Like a
now, in the
uniform.
Moon Knight comics, many of Moon Knight's foes had Nazi links since the character's Jewish upbringing was a big part of his conflicts. Maybe Harrow in this show is also rooted in those Nazi experiments, and his cult could be on some old Nazi compound in Bavaria. Harrow tells Stephen, there's chaos in you, suggesting he does have some perceptive abilities and can see the demonic possession inside of Stephen. And yeah, this is happening in that museum. Could it be by happenstance that they met? Or was Harrow seeking the same thing that Mark Spector, kissed by this demon, is also unconsciously seeking? Then another shot of Stephen flipping out while someone talks to him in the foreground. Could be talking to himself. Like this could be taking place inside of Stephen / Mark / Jake's mind palace, where the other two identities have to hang out when they're not in the driver's seat. Then this great shot on the cupcake delivery truck as it speeds down that mountain road, and Stephen Mark Jake comes to, shocked at the gun in his hand in his current situation. The truck's windshield has been blown out. His face and knuckles are covered in blood, just like they were in that teaser shot. Now that box behind him reads Von D. The rest of the name cut off. And yes, I did lose my mind too for a second, thinking this could be Victor Von Doom. But I am sorry to disappoint you. It is just the name of the cupcake distributor, which you can see on other boxes in the back. It looks like Von Derelman. But also in the back, that dude's face looks gnarly. Either a cupcake might have smeared on his face, or he's bleeding heavily from the head, or maybe both.
Yeah.
It's just super violent to see this guy who might have been shot in the head about to roll out the back of the car under these two pursuing cars. You'll notice they are driven by guys wearing the same kind of outfit he is. So I guess Stephen beat them all up trying to get to Harrow, and now they're chasing him down. And I guess this will lead to Stephen completely falling off a cliff, though presumably he's gonna transform into Moon Knight mid-fall and manage to stick a superhero landing. On to the next clip.
Embrace the chaos.
Whoa. Is he fighting like a beast?
Okay, we see the Great Pyramids of Egypt, and then I'm guessing this is Mark Spector inside of a temple or a tomb. I think this could be part of a buried and semi-forgotten backstory when Mark Spector was still in that identity that Stephen Grant does not remember as his Stephen Grant identity, working as a loser in this museum gift shop. It's gonna be in this museum where he reconnects with Khonshu that awakens Stephen Grant to remember that he had this whole past as a mercenary and an Indiana Jones type badass. So he thought his whole life he's been a loser, but through his dissociative identity disorder, he's gonna remember how much of a killer he actually is. I love how, as we see him fleeing down this hallway, Khonshu's form trails at his feet in the form of that crescent-shaped shadow. Then we hear Harrow's voice advising, embrace the chaos. And then another mirror shot as Stephen throws his head back to allow Moon Knight to take over. I love this. He can see the linen wraps assemble over his shoulders, each tiny fiber piecing together. This looks like the bathroom that later appears busted as he beats up that creature. But we actually see a similar moment where this happened happens outside. It's just so cool to see how this works. Like the Moon Knight identity is mummifying his body to transport him into the land of the dead, but just for the night. And in this exterior shot, some shadowy figure is watching this happen from the lower right corner of the frame. But we end on this awesome shot. Now, we did see Moon Knight pummeling something in the November teaser, but that shot was not finished. And now we see what they added in. He's beating up some supernatural creature with freakishly long legs, huge canine feet, and pointy ears. Now, my first instinct goes to werewolf, because the MCU is soon going to introduce us to Werewolf by Night, Jack Russell, Gabriel Garcia Bernal, in an upcoming Halloween special, it sounds like. But I think a likelier option is this could be a jackal form, as seen in The God of the Dead, Anubis. And as Moon Knight turns to camera, a few of those linen wraps stretch across his chest to hold the crescent moon sigil in place. I love how practical that all is. Actually, this shape looks like the crescent dart weapon that he uses, as we saw in that series poster that I love so much.
Oh, that's super cool.
I'm totally with you. I'm just so stoked.
For me, it's super exciting when things that I have kind of had a bit of an interest in ever since I was a little kid. This sort of stuff is the sort of nerdy stuff that I used to, go hang out in the library after school and like read up on Egyptian gods. And I always thought like the whole history of that, the mummification and everything was so interesting. And so I love when you get that kind of stuff where they take lore that is kind of known, that's out in the real world as history, or I don't know if anyone still is worshipping these deities. It's super ancient, right? But I love that they're taking this knowledge, this lore, and then turning it into MCU canon. Like, that is so cool to me. I actually don't know anything about the moon god, but it is kind of weirdly dope that he is potentially beating up Anubis. I'm just like, what? It's so cool. Just this marriage of ancient and new, and magic and mummies and all of that, and then he's a badass superhero as well. I dig it.
I was a fan of Stargate. They took Egyptian lore there and they made it high tech and modern and sci-fi and whatnot. There was a lot of stuff he pointed out in the trailer, just slowing it down and whatnot, that I completely missed in my first watch through of the trailer. I was like, oh my God, there's so much going on there. As expected. Little things like when he was leaving his reflection and the reflection was still looking at him, trailing behind. I thought that was really neat. The amount of personalities he had, I wasn't aware of. Like, I knew that there was like something off there where he had at least two personalities, like Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. But I didn't realize there was three of them. I am excited in the same way that I was excited for what's his name when he did Split.
James McAvoy.
Yeah, James McAvoy. Just to see these different personalities and how they're going to interact with each other. We've been watching a lot of that on YouTube for years, and so to see Oscar Isaac tackle that kind of challenge is really fun. I wondered about the amount of action he's doing in this. What I'm expecting is kind of like with Spider-Man, we're going to see a lot of him in full gear, right?
Sure.
But there was that one moment where he had blood on his face and he was in the street and whatever. He obviously had an action sequence where you can actually see him, and so it made me wonder just like the kind of challenge that Oscar Isaac has decided to embark upon here, because he not only has to carry 3 or 4 different personalities, but he also has to be a badass and do these action sequences and whatnot. And so obviously he's extremely capable. So just seeing him do that has me excited more than anything else. Coming from complete ignorance into this, I'm super stoked seeing what they're doing here and how they're merging it with the old lore, and see how it all integrates into the larger MCU, introducing Blade and whatnot.
Yeah, I am so stoked for that, because you know this, but maybe you guys don't, but I am like a really big Supernatural fan. I'm not talking about the show, although the show was a lot of fun, just in terms of things like vampires and werewolves and stuff like that. And I think it's so exciting that they're gonna be a bigger part of the MCU now, so I am just so stoked to see where they take this.
I think his outfit looks so cool.
Yeah.
There's something, just the texture to it, and it looks quite unique from other stuff we've seen from other MCU superheroes thus far, with the hood and the moon emblem and whatnot, and the moon here. And I'm excited to see him use that weapon. I'm wondering how that's gonna play out.
Yeah.
So
it's looking really cool, and I'm also just really excited to see how they tackle the whole whole dissociative identity disorder and that whole mental health aspect of it. They did a really great job in WandaVision with exploring grief and what that means.
Right.
And so I feel like this is in good hands, you know, like, and like you were saying in the reaction, it does kind of have that horror movie vibe.
Yes.
So it's something that feels kind of different coming on Disney Plus, which I like.
Yeah, I mean, he's got a lot to be afraid of.
Yeah,
and
like he's losing his damn mind.
Presumably himself more than anyone else.
Yeah.
More than anything else. He's afraid of himself and like what he's capable of. He's not sure how to manage that. And the whole thing is embracing the chaos.
Embrace the chaos, everyone. I can't wait.